Good evening, treasure seekers. This is Blake coming to you live from New Mexico, and joining me, as always, from Washington State, it's Bryn and Cody. How's it going, guys?
I have built up so much anticipation for this episode the past couple days. Cody's just been like scouring through the book, just building up all this information that he claims to have and won't tell me, so we can get authentic reaction on the pod. So there better be some good tidbits in this one.
I set a high bar, so if anyone wants to see Bryn's disappointed face, this is the episode to see.
A lot of promises. Let's see
Oh,
what
yeah.
happens. Yeah, no, we've been in the dark. I haven't been communicating with you two too much over the past few days, so I'm also have it high anticipation, so don't disappoint. No pressure. All right, this is the There's Treasure Inside, the unofficial podcast. Today we're going to be covering chapter 3 of the book There's Treasure Inside by Jon Collins-Black. This is a nationwide treasure hunt within the United States that Jon Collins-Black has hidden 5 different treasures across the United States that so far nobody has found any yet after about, I say, 1 month of release of the book. Maybe a little less than a month, but yeah. Tons of people working on this in the communities we're a part of. There's one lion's share treasure. That's the largest treasure box with the most loot in it, worth maybe $1 million or more. And then 4 smaller treasure boxes that each have an dedicated chapter in the part 2 of the book for solving those smaller treasures. So anyway, should we dive right into it? Bryn, I think you're leading us off with the news segment this week.
Boom, sound effect.
First piece of news, we have sound effects for this episode.
Oh yeah.
Second piece of news that you probably caught on is Cody now has a headset. So hopefully, well, a new headset. So hopefully the audio on his end is a little better. I will try to sort out my audio here soon. Main news for this episode. The ebook is now, or ebooks, I should say, are now live. JCB sent out an email this morning that the ebooks are now available to purchase. And so I think that's been causing a lot of discussion amongst the Discord community and whatnot about everybody in a frenzy to try to now compare and contrast the physical book to the ebook and what pages are included and maybe what are some things that we thought were typos or those reflected in the ebook and just any details that's possible to kind of compare and contrast between an electronic version and a physical version to help narrow down what we are considering clues. And so I think, yeah, all that chaos kind of started this morning. I haven't necessarily been tracking it too closely, but yeah, it sounds like at least the book is now more accessible to people. Again, it's available in parts. So part 1 for the lion's share is available as its own ebook, and then the part 2 treasures are also their own separate ebooks as well. So if you've not been able to get your hands on a physical copy, now's your chance to get an ebook.
Are you guys gonna get the ebooks? Or are you gonna be part of the hype of trying to solve the differences between the ebook and the regular hard copy?
I can't say I'm too keen on trying to get into those details. I'll probably just keep a watchful eye over what other people have been finding, unless it seems like later on it's becoming more relevant to like a specific solve or something like that. I might get more into details.
Do you know how much
I had
the book is? The books are?
I think it was cheap. I clicked on the link this morning and I can't tell you how much, but it was a good price.
I
For,
thought the
Okay.
part 2s were like somewhere in like the $6 or $7 for each of the 4 part 2s.
Yeah, that's a little steep for the part 2s. It's because it's
Yeah.
only like
A
5
couple of them
pages.
are 2 or 3 pages, and a couple of them, yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I've never delved into ebooks except for my Kindle, right? But my Kindle's in black and white, and so I don't know, like when you purchase an ebook, do you get like a PDF version or something like that? But obviously I've not done my research yet, so thank you for reporting that, Bryn.
Well, I was
Yep.
also surprised on like the actual like Kindle format too. Because I'm thinking like with a Kindle, can't you scale the words? So like page numbers then would be very different compared to the physical book, which I think we've noted a few times. It seems like page numbers potentially could be very important. So I don't know, is that a clue that maybe that they are not as important as we thought?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, the part about the ebooks that most interests me is the potential to do like a search for specific words.
Yeah, it makes the transition from physical print to digital searching now a little bit easier if you have an ebook that is translatable electronically to a text file some way.
Hmm.
I mean, I think people probably already have done that with scanning in the book and then making a digital file. I have not seen that distributed because I think that's highly frowned upon, so that's good. But certainly for personal use, I'm sure people have done that already. I have not, but
I've seen a couple people like provide a sample page of what they've scanned in, but obviously not providing their whole book.
mhm. All right. Thank you for the news segment. Shall we go into horseshoes and hand grenades? I forget which horseshoes and hand grenades sound effect we wanted.
Number 2.
Okay. So horseshoes and hand grenades. That is a solve that we are working on personally. That didn't really pan out, or we don't think has panned out. Full disclaimer: if it is a good solve at the end of all of this, give us money.
Accepting Bitcoin.
Accepting Bitcoin. Anyway, so yeah, we want to try to add some new content to the community with some of our solves that we've been working on to hopefully inspire others or prevent others from going down a dead end. So I am taking the lead on that today with a brand new solve that I don't think I've seen posted anywhere on any of the communities. So this is a new solve for the community that I want to present today. It's regarding, of course, the past and future box, which is part 2 of the book. So it's one of the individual smaller boxes, the past and future box. That's obviously the one, if you've listened to the podcast at all, the one we've been focusing most heavily on for our personal investigations into where treasures are. We've gravitated towards the past and future box. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I have some visuals that I'll pull up shortly, but basically the quote within part 2, within the past and future box that I focused in on was, let me get my book so I can read it verbatim. It is on the second page of the past and future box that contains text, at least. Sorry, I need to find it.
Get too flustered with sound effects.
Okay, too flustered with sound effects. The bottom of page 225. It's not as imaginative as Dungeons and Dragons, but it is a game I am pretty sure you can excel at. Just don't get too upset at me if it's too easy. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I'm focused on the last sentence. Just don't get upset at me if it's too easy. And it's the upset part that kind of stuck out to me. All right. So upset, what's a synonym for upset? Any guesses?
I know the answer, so
You do?
guess.
Okay. So yeah, the connection I made there was upset also could mean like frustrated or frustration. And so there's a lot of talk in this chapter about games, a little bit of talk about board games. In other chapters and at the beginning of part 2, he also talks about him and his partner's, enjoyment of board games. And so trying to link upset, frustrated to board games is where I've made this connection. Okay. And I'm going to pull up my figure now. because I think that's helpful. So, we have a game in the United States called Trouble, Pop-O-Matic Trouble, but it's a proxy in the United Kingdom, also distributed by Milton Bradley here. I don't know if that's the same company now, but Trouble in the United Kingdom is called Frustration. And so when I started thinking about board games, I started thinking about that X in the middle of the word search, which I will have a figure of that shortly. But this board layout really reminded me of that cross of O's or zeros that is found in the middle of the word search. And so taking that pattern, looking at the kind of X formation of the trouble board, or in this case, the frustration board, and picturing in my mind what that looks like on the word search, and then taking the rest of the frustration board, which is kind of surrounding that X formation, I tried to make an anagram out of those letters. So let me pull that up now, because I think it's pretty exciting. Let me stop sharing that. Sorry, technical hurdles here.
I just can't stop laughing at a game called Frustration. What fun. Everyone gather around, we'll play Frustration.
I mean, it's kind of like Sorry, right?
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, I think it's a more apt name than Trouble. Frustration is a good theme for that game. Okay, so now here is the word search. As you can see, I've highlighted that X or that plus symbol of the zeros. That's kind of I would say it's still a mystery within the community right now exactly what that's used for. So I highlighted that, and then around that plus, I highlighted the purple letters that I use for my anagram. And as you can see down below, I've actually turned that into 19 tray. 19 tray. And to me, that links to another potential solve, which is what a lot of folks have been talking about on the Discord, and we've been talking about personally, actually, for a number of weeks, I would say at this point, is the Zork.
Pretty deep dive into it.
The Zork solve. And the Zork solve is interesting because Zork is a kind of older video game from the 80s, a text-based adventure game. And within that text-based adventure game, the point is to collect 19 treasures. And so 19 tray just immediately jumped out to me as being short for 19 treasures. And so maybe that is the biggest coincidence of the day ever. But to me, I was pretty excited about that. That's as far as I've taken that solve so far. I think it might be a coincidence, but it's a very odd one, I would say. Tray is spelled Tray here, not like Trea. But to me, that is really an odd coincidence if it is a coincidence. So people are welcome.
And you play treasure, or you play trouble, frustration in a bit of a tray scenario.
Yes, it is a tray. Interesting.
I mean, I think it's pretty good just that, all the letters are accounted for. It's not like you're just trying to pull this out and be like, oh, well, there's an extra like L in there somewhere or something like that. So, could it be a coincidence? Absolutely. But it also feels like getting two words out of this, one being 19 and tray also being linked. Even if that's a stretch, it's like, it still seems pretty impressive.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tips accepted.
I think that JCB left you a personal hint to continue working on this, because the four corners I noticed between your pink or red squares there are CONT for continue. Continue down this path, Blake.
All right. That is very, very promising. All right. I'll see you guys next week. All right. That was my horseshoes and hand grenades of the day, which I think is just a straight arrow. It's not even close. It's right on the bullseye. Segment was misnamed. All right, that's all I have. People are welcome to run with that as they wish. Cody, shall we move into the Discord Detectives segment?
I think we should. Hit me with the sound effect.
Nice.
What's going on in the Discord or Reddit communities right now? What do you want to report on?
I want to report on the one of the 4 smaller boxes, the Pokemon box. I just want to get people kind of caught up. Something that we haven't mentioned yet. I think it's kind of cat's out of the bag. A lot of people are already aware of this, but we want to make note of it. I'm going to later in this episode, hopefully, touch on some stuff that'll reference the Pokemon box. So I thought it'd be good to get people caught up. So Blake, if you want to queue up that first photo there. So the Pokemon box, it gives a long narrative about meeting a bunch of different Pokemon, references an old road trip that he went on. I'm sure we'll get into that more in future episodes. But at the end of the chapter, there is this photo, and this is kind of the main picture evidence in the chapter. And I believe in the narrative, he talks about how he had taken a series of photos on the road trip or during his adventures with this Pokemon, but they all were overexposed, and this was the only one that he had left that he could save. And as you can see, it just kind of looks vaguely like a hillside, maybe some water, maybe some rocks. I think people are thinking that it could be some sort of digitally altered representation of where the treasure is buried or not buried. They're not buried, but placed. Yeah, obviously, purple, kind of strange, looks almost like nature when you first look at it. And then the more you look, the more it kind of just seems like more abstract shapes. There's been a lot of people who have pointed out what they believe to be like different Pokemon faces or Pokemon bodies or figures in this photo. I'm not really convinced of any of them except for the one that we're about to talk about in a second. The one that I am convinced of is the quote unquote Mewtwo, and I don't think it's supposed to exactly look like Mewtwo because of, I'm sure, licensing reasons. But in kind of the right hand side, halfway up the page where Blake's cursor is there, there's a figure that if you zoom in, it definitely looks like some sort of digital representation of Mewtwo, which is also kind of links back to the story. And like I said, we'll get into the narrative of the Pokemon box, I'm sure, in future episodes. But he makes some references to what we believe to be Mewtwo. And so I think the consensus is that Mewtwo is in some way either in this photo is indicating where the treasure is placed or is offering some other indication as to, I don't know if he's pointing there, offering some other clue or indication towards the treasure. So yeah, pretty short and sweet as far as Discord detective segments go. But just wanted to get people caught up with the main takeaway from the Pokemon box so far. That seems to be kind of the consensus.
So is this image that we're looking at here, Cody, was that enhanced at all by whoever posted that? Or is
That
this
is
just
my
as...
I do all my own art, Blake. I took that photo straight out of the straight out of the straight
Really?
out of the book with my own phone. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh,
I
wow.
just
So
yeah.
that is a lot more detailed than I expected, actually, after looking at the first image. I
Yeah,
don't
and
think I've looked...
it's funny because yeah, I took both of those actually just right before filming this with my phone. And even when I looked back at the first picture I took, which is just like slightly more zoomed out, I couldn't find him, and I had to look again and then track him down with my phone to take the closer picture. But yeah, I'm happy with how it turned out. It's a lot more noticeable once it's kind of blown up and not enhanced, but bigger and cropped.
Yeah, no, I'd seen this picture before, but I had never noticed there was even like complete legs and everything down here. That's really cool.
Yeah, I almost think the legs are kind of the most prominent part.
Right, right. Yeah, this is great. That's a great summary of kind of one of the major clues we're assuming in the Pokemon box.
Yeah, and because that one, especially zoomed up like that, looks so clear and distinct, it makes me even more hesitant to accept some of the other quote unquote Pokemon that people have taken pictures in that photo.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, Pokemon box certainly of interest to a lot of folks. I have obviously not looked very closely into that box yet, so that is super helpful to me as well. Thank you, Cody.
You're quite welcome.
Right. Comments or questions about the Pokemon box? Bryn, I think you're the most Pokemon relevant person here. I was a little bit older. I was doing more Star Trek cards.
Cody's gonna be personally offended by
I
that.
am personally offended 100%.
Oh, you're the biggest Pokemon man.
I'm the biggest Pokemon, I think, for the original 151. After that, I don't care anymore. I'm a big 151 guy.
Not a big Digimon man.
Never a Digimon man.
I mean, as far as commentary, I hadn't looked into the Pokemon box at all, and yeah, I honestly hadn't even really looked into that image other than in passing. So yeah, that is pretty undeniable, impressive. It makes me want to investigate that a little bit more thoroughly.
Don't get distracted. You got to work on the trouble solve a bit more.
I know. First things first.
All right, cool. That is excellent work, Cody. Very good.
Oh, it's not my work, just reporting.
Okay, good reporting. You're a real too yet, new yet. All right. It's a callback. Listen to chapter 2 coverage for too yet, new yet. All right. Should we do coincidence of the day? Bryn, you're leading that.
Yes. Spooky.
Oh man.
Okay. So
Not a distraction at all.
I just wanted to pick a quick coincidence of the day because Cody is built up that he has so much to talk through about this chapter, so I don't want to take too much time. Okay, so when we first received the book, I think obviously upon first pass, everybody was just kind of like physically flipping through this book, looking for any just like initial huge red flags as far as like here's some clues. One of the first things I think that people noticed is that if you open up the sleeve on the physical book, I guess what you need to do first is you align the sleeve that comes with the physical book up directly with the X. So you kind of have to shift it down a little bit on the book. But then if you pull open the sleeve and look behind on the front cover, you have the quote, "Be solid, have grit, sparkle even as you pine. Here lies a joy divine." And it just so happens that that quote lines up perfectly with the middle of the X on the front cover. And I think I looked into that a little bit as far as like, does this mean more than just, that in itself as a fact? I don't think it necessarily does. So just a little coincidence. I'm sure it was intentional, but yeah, just felt like we wanted to quickly touch on that there is that quote hiding in there. And I'm sure it does play into the greater messaging overall.
I'm sure people are wondering, I do remember when I first saw that little quote there, I remember doing a quick Google search and nothing immediately came up. So that may be a unique original saying or quote.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, a Jon Collins-Black original. Yeah, so that's an open question, I think, for the ebook owners. Like, does the ebook include that quote? Because it's hidden on the back of the sleeve of the book. So I'm curious. I'm sure we could probably look that up, but I'm curious to know that.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of questions surrounding the ebook and the physical book.
All right, that was coincidence of the day. Thank you, Bryn. All right, you guys ready to dive into the heart of the episode?
You bet.
All right, so
do we have a heart of the episode sound effect?
No. We don't at this point. Send us a heart of the episode sound clip to tips.ttiunofficialpodcast@gmail.com. All right. So this is going to be an episode that's covering chapter 3 of There's Treasure Inside. by Jon Collins-Black. I'm actually flipped to the wrong chapter. I apologize, but this is called A Puzzle Box, A Magnifying Glass, and The Mysterious Egg is the name of the chapter. The subtext underneath that is joy is in the details. And we have 2 quotes also associated with this chapter. The first one is by Henry Cartier-Bresson. In photography, the smallest thing can be a great subject. The little human detail can be a leitmotiv. And did you guys look up what leitmotiv is?
I did not.
Okay, you
No.
might be understanding that a bit more when we get to our nuggets.
Oh,
All right, and then the second quote is associated from Gasho Aoyama. It says, "With a keen eye for details, one truth prevails." That's a pretty inspiring quote. Anybody volunteer to kick us off on starting the summarization and takeaways from this chapter?
yeah, I can do that. So another chapter where he manages to cram a lot of topics into just a few pages. I'm starting to think that he's going to be probably doing that in every chapter. He's a lot he wants to say, and a limited number of pages to do it in. So he immediately starts off talking about his trip to Japan, how he was burnt out with his career, took a trip to Japan and loved it, and then segues into talking about Japanese puzzle boxes, which are ornamental, decorative boxes that have no clear and distinct way of opening them. And they're a puzzle where a lot of times you like shift panels in a certain sequence to eventually open the box. That served as inspiration to him for the treasure hunt boxes themselves, the treasure boxes that he's containing the treasure in. He says, you know, the treasure that he's hiding is so great. He wants something that's like an outward reflection of the inner treasure in that box. So he goes kind of on a quest to find the boxes that he wants and ends up finding Seth Gold, who has oh, you'll have to remind me the name of it, like the Smithsonian, right?
Yeah,
Has an art exhibit or an art piece called Coffer, which is basically he had also gone to Japan, seen the Japanese puzzle boxes, and did a similar thing. But he's a metal worker and made a very intricate and super cool puzzle box out of metal. Speaking of, I did go on his website and look at, he has like a short, like 3-minute video of him making coffer, and it's super cool. I'd recommend that anyone goes and looks at that because that was a super cool video. Um, then likens them to Michael Perkin, who worked as one of the head guys for the Fabergé company, the House of Fabergé, who makes Fabergé eggs. Talked a little bit about Michael Perkins' attention to detail and Fabergé eggs. Talked about a specific Fabergé egg that had been lost for a long period of time, showed up at like an antique show. No one knew how much it was worth. A scrap metal dealer haggled for some amount of money, obviously a low amount of money relative to how much he should have paid for what ended up being a Fabergé egg. It sat for like a decade in his kitchen while he ate his cereal, and then um, eventually he looks a little closer at it and realizes it's potentially a Fabergé egg. Gets it all verified. It's worth like $33 million or something like that. And so the overall theme of the chapter is to have attention to detail. The guy who eventually decided to have attention to detail figured out he had a $33 million Fabergé egg. Michael Perkin, who worked at Fabergé, had an amazing attention to detail. Seth Gold had amazing attention to detail, and the Japanese puzzle box makers. So all of those different topics, all in this chapter about attention to detail.
excellent. That's an excellent summary. Thank you, Cody. Comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think the attention to detail, obviously. I think also just kind of that specifically with craftsmanship in this specific context. I think Cody did a wonderful job summarizing. So I actually don't have too much to add as far as content.
Yeah, when I originally read this chapter, I thought that this chapter, my initial impression was that this chapter was like a set aside chapter with few hints, if any hints, to kind of almost thank Seth Gould for his work on the project and kind of talk about how great he was. I reread it a couple times, and I feel like every time I reread it, I started finding things that were either coincidences or hints or things to kind of look out for. So this ended up being a chapter that I got pretty excited about.
That's super interesting because, yeah, I think I'm still in the boat of your primary intuition, which is I really didn't find too much in this chapter that I thought was nugget worthy or leading towards hints for the treasure. I actually read it twice through pretty well, looking because the first pass I was not satisfied, and so I read it again a little more slowly. I still came up pretty empty-handed compared to the first two chapters where I had a ton of different ideas to go to. So I'm super excited to hear about what you found. Bryn, did you have his initial impression on this in terms of clues or hints that we should be getting from this beyond attention to detail, which is a little ironic that I tried and I didn't find too much, but
I think with my first pass, the main thing like that seemed a little suspicious to me was just the Fabergé egg like being an egg itself. Because I think I don't know how much we want to get into other solves, but I think some other solves throughout the book maybe tie back to like an egg in one way or another. And maybe that's just coincidence of some misleading routes that we've gone, but it does seem like I've picked up on eggs in a few spots,
Yeah.
uh, which coincidence or not, I don't know. But that was the first thing that jumped out as to me as like, oh, this is something that ties in later in the book as well.
And that makes sense because he does reference a lot of like third party games and movies and stuff. And I think an egg is a trope, right, for something with treasure inside of it. So yeah, that's a good point.
Cody, did you mention the connection to the treasure box with the Fabergé egg? If not, I can bring it up here because the Fabergé egg, as you said, is worth an estimated $33 million. That is not part of the treasure. But there is a magnifying glass, a Fabergé magnifying glass that was designed or built by Michael Perkin. That is part of the treasure. So that's kind of the connection. As we've seen, all of the treasures that Jon Collins-Black is including in these boxes has some connection to at least part of the stories in the chapters that he's writing. So that's the connection there in case we missed it.
How are you guys, real quick, and I know we want to get into our FFPNs, but real quick, how are you guys feeling about the takeaways that Jon's leaving us in these chapters? Are you feeling like, I know we're only 3 chapters in at this point, but I'm wondering, is it something that's actually going to point us in a direction, or are these kind of all going to be fortune cookie type type lessons? You know, are we going to get 12 chapters in and his next lesson is just keep trying? That kind of thing. Hang in there. What's your thoughts? What's your impression?
I think it's I think at the top level it's just general guidance, but I'm hoping that once we get through more of the chapters, we will start finding maybe some consistencies across these hints, or
start pointing us in some sort of direction.
That maybe we'll start to feel slightly more solid about what we should be looking for in these chapters. But I think and even as he mentioned in the introduction to the book, read it through once and then go back and read it through with an eye towards looking for clues. And we're kind of doing that as a hybrid right now in terms of we're reading it for the content. Obviously, we're presenting the themes. They're laid out pretty clearly at a high level. And then we're trying to also find some connection to those themes with our nuggets. So that's a long-winded way of saying I'm not quite sure yet. My initial gut is hope, I guess, that we will be able to make some connections as we read it more detailed all the way through.
I'm aligned with that take. I think they're intentionally high level, and I think part of that intention being like not wanting us to dig too deep into it at this point, or not thinking that we need to dig too deep. But I do think on like further passes through the book, I think there will be more layers and depth to it that we just can't quite understand yet. But yeah, with like same that's my hope, at least.
I mean, I think the most tangible one that I was happy with you came up with in the first chapter, Bryn, I believe, about building a roadmap. Was that your idea? Like, is this actually going to be a map or a roadmap that we fill in with all the lessons or all the hints that we find along the way here? I didn't see that necessarily in this chapter. Something I could grab onto very easily. All right.
Well, do we get into nuggets so Cody can reveal all?
Cody's going to reveal his single nugget.
I knew you were going to say that, and I was thinking as I'm reading the chapter, I'm like, no matter what, I just have to have one sentence, no asterisks.
No, you can do
Like,
whatever
I mean,
you
that's
want. Let's not be
what we're here
limiting
to do.
ourselves.
I've got my main nugget, but then I've got like something I'm gonna call quick fire, where I hit you with some quick fire ones that
Yep.
were like on my short list of potential nuggets at one point.
Good.
Because I read through it a number of times. There are things I want to say, even though it doesn't fall under my one true FFPN.
All right, let's officially get into FFPNs.
I'm waiting for a sound effect. Oh,
Wow.
I missed it.
Yeah, I had to turn off my noise suppression.
Sorry,
Bryn
I talked.
recommended that. That's okay.
I talked right over
There'll be
it.
plenty of opportunities to hear it later.
It was my favorite one, and I talked right over it.
We'll have to wait till chapter 4. Sorry, Cody. All right. I don't know. What order should we do it in? Should we save Cody as a grand finale, or?
I think
you guys, you're talking it up way too much, and I'm just gonna ramble like a madman at the end. And you're gonna be like, "We waited days for this."
Blake goes first. I don't think you've gone first yet.
I haven't gone first yet, so yeah. And again, this is the chapter I was least satisfied in so far. So let me find my nugget here. Sorry.
While you're looking for that, I'll real quick run through the what a FFPN Forrest Fenn Picked Nugget is.
Yeah.
So all three of us read through the chapter, and we each pick out one and only one like sentence or I guess thing within that chapter that we think is a clue or very interesting, something to look into, something that stood out to us in that chapter. We don't tell each other because part of the fun is when we finally announce them live or semi-live to each other, seeing if we had picked the same ones, because if we do, it's a pretty good indicator that it is something that is meant to be noted. So either we pick the same ones and we get our validation, or we pick different ones and then we just have all that much more to explore.
All right. So I actually hinted at it and then forgot, but mine is actually the first quote that's referenced in the chapter, which was by Henry Cartier-Bresson. In photography, the smallest thing can be a great subject. The little, human detail can become a leitmotif. And so I had to look up what a leitmotif was. And a leitmotif is a short, recurring musical phrase that is associated with a specific person, place, or idea. And then it comes from German, blah, 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 a little bit of more definition. But I think it kind of goes back to something I've always been interested in, which is, Jon Collins-Black is a musician. And so taking that quote at face value, I think, is that the quote is actually about photography and pictures. And then if you look closer, the little human detail can become a leitmotif. And so I'm wondering if we can find in this chapter, I didn't really find anything that looked obvious to me, but maybe somewhere throughout the book, we can find a picture that somehow has a musical hint associated with it. Maybe there's some notes that we can take advantage of to find a title of a song, something like that. So that's my picked nugget for this chapter.
Can you say the definition one more time?
Yeah, happy to. A leitmotif is a short, recurring musical phrase that is associated with a specific person, place, or idea. I don't have any. Oh, here. Google says, what is an example of a leitmotif? One famous example is the Imperial March from Star Wars. So you all know that. Dun, 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 dun. So that's a leitmotif for when, as soon as you hear that, you know it's like Darth Vader or the Empire. It's immediately associated with a person, place, or concept.
I like that a lot. I've had on my list of things in the back of my mind Jon's music history and how he could potentially work that into a clue. So I'm glad you picked that out, because once again, you have a knack for choosing ones that I looked at, thought I need to look into that, and then just totally forgot. So yeah, that's a really good one.
Thank you. All right, Bryn, you want to give your nugget?
All right. Yes. So mine is a quote about the treasure boxes themselves. So obviously, like Cody was explaining, JCB was very intentional about the boxes that he wanted to actually hide the treasure in, and was not satisfied with everything that he could possibly find, to the extent of having Seth create these boxes for him so they could be perfect. Which made me think that this quote is super weird. So it is, I left instructions with the box explaining exactly how to execute the 7 steps to open it. How is this executed? Oh, that's it. That's the end of the call. The rest of my...
if that were a text message, I would put haha.
That's fair. Okay. So he left instructions with the box explaining exactly how to open it, the 7 steps, because it is a puzzle box. And so I thought that was super weird, because he wanted to have such attention to detail and design, and how this box was presented, which then made me think, like, well, how is he including instructions with this, with how this treasure is hidden? Because my first initial thought was like, oh, like a laminated sheet attached to the box. And like, that seems so tacky for how grand he has tried to make these boxes. So I guess it's more just thinking through the logistics of what would a treasure box actually look like when you find it. Because I think I've been trying to look into like the materials of the boxes themselves. How does that fit into like the natural environment that it could be hidden in? But seemingly it's like, is this even out in the open, or is it contained within like a weatherproof box? So you have to open a weatherproof box to get into this box. Then there's instructions. Even if that's the case, it still seems like that's not the presentation he is going for. So I don't know. I don't have any answers, other than I thought it was weird to like somehow be including instructions to open the puzzle box.
And
Diminishing the presentation.
I think the important thing to note is, I think it was in this chapter as well, as he said, if you find the box, don't try to break it to open it, because it's a work of art, right? So that's why he's including the instructions, so that people don't just force their way in there. Yeah. I guess I have one more comment on that, if that's all right. I have seen some speculation that these are weatherproofed and they're going to be contained within a secondary container. And there was actually a post on one of the Discord channels on the, and I don't know why it was here, but it was on the other book that he wrote. Sorry, let me look it up. Our Unbreakable Thread. And for some reason, somebody had posted a random screenshot from a German interview that he had done with a TV station in Germany, and there was a pelican case, like a plastic box, in the far background of that screenshot. And they said, look for a clue here, and so they're speculating that that black plastic box might be what the treasure is actually going to look like when you find it, and then you open it up to find the treasure box inside. So that's, as far as I know, all speculation, but it kind of addresses your question that people are talking about what the actual find is going to look like at face value.
Yeah, that is all really good context. I think it really takes out a component of how the box could camouflage into the environment that it's hidden. So
Yeah,
that
and
was my nugget.
my gut feeling, kind of when I picture me finding the box, I picture it as like a pelican case is what I was thinking. I was also not picturing it particularly camouflaged. I guess that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought that he'd put it somewhere that's like maybe more likely to someone to come across it by accident, but camouflage it, I pictured it like off a trail where no one would go unless they were specifically looking for something and not camouflaged. But I guess either one of those, I guess there's no real way of knowing until one of them is found.
Right, right. The first find is going to be massive for the community, and it's going to be Cody because he is planning ahead.
So
Lesson from chapter 2.
I'm visualizing.
Don't wing it. Visualize. Very good.
All right, you ready for my FFPN?
I'm so excited. Yes.
I'm either going to have struck gold or it's going to be the ramblings of a madman. All right, here we go. My quote is, at birth, Perkins' chances of one day being revered in the industry of high-end jewelry design seemed far-fetched. So I, with my history in the original 151 Pokemon, that jumped out to me right away because Farfetch'd is one of the original 151 Pokemon.
Really?
Now that might just seem like, oh, who cares? I do think it's phrased kind of weird, that sentence to almost, and that's probably a confirmation bias thing. I will admit that I feel like he would have phrased it differently if he didn't want to purposely include the word far-fetched. But far-fetched is in there, and that's a Pokemon. And that got me going down kind of a trail of things that might seem like confirmation bias, but I wasn't specifically searching for these things. They just kind of naturally came up. They presented themselves to me. So a lot of the chapter is about this area where the Japanese puzzle boxes are made. And I did not look up how to pronounce it. I'm assuming it's Hakone. I'm going to call it Hakone unless someone corrects me here.
Yeah, I was looking at that earlier. I think it's my guess is that it's Hakone.
Hakone? Okay, I believe you. I'm going to go with Hakone.
Thanks.
Now Hakone is in the Kanto region of Japan. All right. You following me so far?
That's new information to me. Okay.
I believe that Kanto is the only region in Pokemon. Kanto is a region in Pokemon, and I believe it's the only region in Pokemon that shares, like, is based off of a real place and shares the exact same name as the real place. So Hakone is in the Kanto region of Japan, which is roughly, I'd say, looking at a map, like 10% of Japan. And then Hakone is also in Pokemon, the name matching perfectly. It is the first region in Pokemon and the original region in Pokemon. Okay, so that's where we're at now. Then, so I saw that. I was like, oh, that's a cool coincidence. I'll write that down. Maybe we'll cover that in coincidence of the day.
Yeah.
Then I go and look into Farfetch'd because I'm like, okay, maybe Farfetch'd is like, so now I'm thinking Pokemon box. I'm thinking maybe Farfetch'd is in like Louisiana. Like, as far as to back up, for Pokemon Go. So in Pokemon Go, it's a Pokemon game that you play on your phone. It uses GPS, and normally you can find pretty much all the Pokemon wherever you are. but there's a few Pokemon that are like region locked or geo locked, and you can only get them in a certain area. So I thought, hey, maybe, this is all a way of circling back to this Farfetch'd idea, and maybe Farfetch'd is geo locked to like Louisiana, because a lot of people are thinking that the southeast United States is where the Pokemon box is. So go and look and see where Farfetch'd is geo locked. There is a version of Farfetch'd that is geo locked, and it's one of, I believe, only 3 Pokemon that are geolocked to not the US, but Japan.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
that's something. Right now, I'm thinking, all right, I'm not even. This isn't confirmation bias because I'm not looking for this, and it happens to be like all kind of linking together here. Um, so I believe that that's all I had at that point, and then I thought, okay, let's look at the Pokemon box chapter in the part 2 of the book.
Yeah.
So I flip there, and one of the first things I see is this frog, and the caption underneath says something, something. It's I know exactly what it says. This adorable frog was carved out of bowenite by the artisans of Fabergé around 1990. Boom. I've
Wow.
got Pokemon box and this chapter 3 with Farfetch'd and Fabergé just pinging off each other like crazy. So that's where I'm at right now. And I feel like this is starting to become too much of a coincidence between the stuff in chapter 3 and Pokemon related stuff. So a couple of things I found just right before filming this podcast. Mewtwo, which is kind of like this is where the box is at guy in the Pokemon box, kind of the one we're trying to track down. He's found in the Kanto region. And the Kanto region, just so you know, is not like half of the Pokemon world. It seems to be like 5% of the Pokemon world. So this is like a
Wow.
pretty specific region. I found that. And the other thing I found, another pronunciation issue here, Mount Tsukuba is also in the Kanto region of Japan and is known as the Purple Mountain, and also a peak on it, I believe it's called the Purple Peak. That photo that's in the book in the Pokemon box is digitally made purple.
Ooh.
So maybe it's a series of 10 coincidences of the day, but I feel like there's got to be something there that's of interest to someone at some point. So far, my gut feeling is that I don't really have a direction this is leading me, but I kind of feel like I cleared an entry point to a trail for some people to go down, including myself. So I will
Wow.
also report back when I know more, but it's exciting time in chapter 3 in Pokemon Box World right now.
Is this where we launch our Patreon community for extra Pokemon tips?
What do you think, Brent? Ramblings of
So
a madman, or was it a decent take?
I I think that's all super interesting, and I do think that's all a really good take. I guess my first question is that goes against what we were thinking, that
Yep,
there's no clues in part 1 uh, to help solve the part 2 boxes, which the Pokemon box is.
correct.
And I guess we don't know that as a fact, that we were mostly just hypothesizing that because of the ebook situation more than anything. Um, yeah,
Yeah, no, I had thought
that's
of that, and you're right. And that's one of the things I've kind of got on my mental list to talk about with you guys on one of these podcasts. Is a few different things that JCB's said, and are we taking them at face value or not? Are we thinking, you know, for instance, he's said that once you find one of the treasures, it'll give you a hint for the next treasure. A lot of things like that. I actually have specific quotes I've written down that he said that I feel like not contradict each other, but at some point it's like, all right, you don't really have anything left to go off of if you eliminate all these things with these different things you're saying. I don't think we have time to dive into all those topics in this podcast. Um, I guess to me, the amount of coincidences I'm seeing makes me think that my gut feeling as of right now is that you can technically find the part 2 treasure with just the stuff in part 2, but the same guy who wrote that also wrote the other chapters. So there's going to be some crossover and maybe some information you can get from part 1. It just seems like too many coincidences to be coincidences. So
I think it's also a good point where you said about like how much do we trust what he's saying and passing in these interviews? Like, I mean, if what we know about him, like he's been doing a lot of press around this book release, and I would assume he's not somebody who's like particularly media trained to have like a talk track, and I would think he's probably just speaking more candidly in these interviews. So it's not like he has specific lines he's trying to hit or rehearsed exactly what he's going to say. So I could see where things are being said that aren't, maybe 100% accurate across the board and consistent throughout all these interviews, just in the nature of having an organic conversation with someone. So
And what I don't want to do is have JCB, give us an exact quote that's like for sure something, and me say, oh no, my confirmation bias overrules that. I'm just not going to listen to what
no,
he says.
you're
But
not doing that.
I think there's some room here for both things to be true. Um, yeah, yeah. Do you guys mind if I hit some of my rapid fire ones that I also found in this chapter?
Yeah, let me just comment on that last statement or that last section though, because I was trying to find the quote in the book, which is why I was distracted here. I couldn't, but I think it's on the Discord here. Um, all of the instructions are in the book, but primarily everything you need is in the chapter, and that's for the past and future, or sorry, for the part 2 boxes. So that
Primarily everything you need.
primarily, so it doesn't mean everything you need. I think you're right that one technically should be able to solve the box with the chapter alone, but it, based on that quote, it doesn't mean that everything is necessarily exclusive to that chapter. So I think
Yes.
there's a way out there.
And this is the same guy who said, and this is part of something else I want to talk about later, but coming from the same guy who said, all you need is a book, some water, and some shoes. So either it's very clearly just in the book, or you don't need any like background information beyond the book or Googling or any other knowledge. So anyway.
Yep. Different counterpoints here and there.
Yeah.
We're not sure yet. First box will help us. Yeah, I would love to hear some more rapid fire nuggets.
All right, here's
this
some
is
rapid
awesome.
fire. Yeah, these are not related to my other take, just other things that at different times I thought would be my FFPN before I went down that Pokemon rabbit hole. Another quote: after having breakfast with it for the better part of a decade, that man finally took the time to notice its little mark. I thought the phrase "notice its little mark" was strange because he had talked about it differently at other points in that chapter. Seemed like an odd phrasing. Little mark stood out. And then I know that in Ready Player One, which is a book that I know Jon Collins-Black has taken inspiration from, there was at least one kind of clue in that book that had to do with letters being notched out and having little marks in them. So that's something that made me think, hey, is that supposed to be pointing us towards looking for little marks in the book as some part of a hint? Rapid fire number 2. Hakone includes the word, this is kind of, there's a couple of these are Hail Marys, but includes the word one as part of the word. I am a huge fan of numbers anywhere I can find them. So just something in the back of my head. Moving on in the book and future chapters, if there's any other like places that include numbers as part of the name, that's something that I'm kind of keeping an eye out for. Big numbers fan.
Okay.
I thought where he says in the chapter, the box shown above, and then the box was not shown above. It was shown on the previous chapter, and it's obviously just like a formatting thing. He wrote the book before he knew the layout of the pages. I think that just gives us some insight into the level of detail, and it's something that he addressed, and we've addressed in previous podcasts, that he wanted to keep the number of eyes on it before it was released limited. So there wasn't a lot of editing. Just gives us more insight into, again, how seriously to take some things. Like there's liable to just be mistakes in the book. More references to blaze, a lot of like they blazed a trail for themselves, stuff like that. I know blaze was a popular word that was pulled out of the original Forrest Fenn poem that that he had written, and that JCB not only took inspiration from, but has one of the little boxes is all based around Forrest Fenn. And then for anyone who doesn't know, both Forrest Fenn and JCB in this situation use blaze to mean something else, but it can also mean like a trail marker, which is obviously something that's very something we'll be coming across because a lot of these are likely hidden on or near trails. I don't know how to pronounce this word. Erudite erudite. He used that word in the chapter.
Oh
And
yeah,
that one,
I had to look that up. Yeah.
yeah, that one jumped out at me because he just seems to have like a very straightforward writing style and kind of, how do I say this, like simpler writing style. And that one jumped out to me like a weird vocab word that he threw in there.
Yeah.
So I looked up that one too and tried to see if there's like any references to anything. I think that's probably a long shot. He probably just decided to get fancy with the word.
Use the
And then
thesaurus.
yeah, I used the thesaurus. And then my last thing I wanted to talk about, my big rambling here. Something that I saw when looking up kind of Japanese puzzle box stuff was they were saying that a lot of simple puzzle boxes, you make like 4 moves or so. But in the more complicated puzzle boxes, one of the things that makes them more complicated beyond just making more moves is that you make a series of moves and then you have to reverse a number of moves. Like it unlocks something that then you reverse a number of moves and then go forward again. So I know that JCB was obviously really into these puzzle boxes, and it's kind of just I think it could be an apt allegory maybe for how he could potentially set up clues where you might maybe doing something that seems super promising, kind of hit a dead end, but I would then personally want to think, did anything at this dead end give me any new information to kind of circle back and keep going? Much like a Japanese puzzle box.
Mm-hmm.
End of monologue.
Excellent. Did not disappoint.
That was a lot to digest, but I think I like a lot of that stuff in there.
You can watch the podcast back on half speed.
Yeah. Start taking notes.
For Cody's single Forrest Fenn Picked Nugget.
It's okay.
No,
For the next chapter, I've got nothing. So this is all my good takes are on this chapter.
So be sure to listen to our next episode too. No, those are all good.
Blake says that he has a lot of great information for the next one.
As I said,
it's time to shine.
I kind of flip-flopped with Cody in terms of I wasn't too satisfied with chapter 3, but had more to talk about for chapter 4. So this is a good balance, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Right.
Yeah, I think making those connections between part 2 and part 1, I think is a little overwhelming to me now because it's like, I don't know, that makes there a lot. I think the part 2 puzzle boxes were very desirable because it felt a little bit more like contained. Like
Yeah.
It felt like you had everything there and like you didn't have to be trying to conquer this entire book to get all these little pieces. And if what we're saying is maybe correct, that you could solve the box with everything in those chapters, but now knowing that you could be finding little nuggets throughout the rest of the book too, suddenly makes those part 2 puzzles a lot more overwhelming.
Yeah, after finding those and even thinking about it over the last few minutes, I'm leaning towards that he gives you, maybe half the clues and it's enough to solve the puzzle too. But then the other half that make it a lot easier to solve part 2 puzzles are also in the book. Yeah, that'll be something interesting to talk about more.
All right. That sounds like a pretty solid episode to me. Thank you, Cody. That was excellent contributions. Yeah, get a drink of water after that. Woo.
Got the new headset just in time.
Yeah, that would have been brutal on the old headset. Ooh. All right. Any parting thoughts? If anyone has tips, please feel free to email into the email box, tips.ttiunofficialpodcast@gmail.com. The email address is below wherever you're listening or watching this, either at the YouTube or Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, or Apple Podcasts. We should have the email link below there. Feel free to comment on videos as well. If you have questions or comments or tips that you want to have us discuss on the podcast. Other than that, everybody have a good evening. Thank you.